Sumerian and Tamil. Dr. Loganatha, or Dr. Loga, as we call him, has made one of the greatest discoveries in Dravidian studies. Over 40 years of research, Dr. Loga has proven that Sumerian represents the Tamil language of the first Cangkam. Many Sumerologists believe that Sumerian is a language isolate. Dr. Loga has proven through the study of Tamil and Sumerian that many Sumerians formerly lived in India and that these Sumerians probably spoke Tamil. Dr. Loga believes that Sumerian is Tamil of the first Cangkam. He has shown that Sumeru, the cradle of civilization in Mesopotamia, is none other than Kumari, the cradle of Dravidian civilization. Dr. Loga has made one of the greatest discoveries in the last 40 years. What he has done is he's been able, in a sense, to let us know that we can find out more about Sumerian by looking at Tamil. Dr. Loga, in a sense, believes that by this being the cradle of civilization, that it can offer us an opportunity today to view the real history of the Sumerians through the people of Tamil. The Sumerians called their civilization K.Ng. And K.Ng in Sumerian meant the noble and trustworthy place. Assyrians called the K.Ng people Sumeritu, the sacred language. Opart popularized the Assyrian name Sumer for the original founders of the civilization. Thus we have today Sumerian and ancient Mesopotamia. There are many black kings in Mesopotamia. Although we often look at the news and we're always told through historians and others that the Sumerians, in a sense, were Europeans or were similar to the white Arabs, we find that in reality, the Sumerian people, like many other people that formerly lived in Mesopotamia, were Cushites. And these Cushites were black people. Although we know that they're black people, most of the art that we find from Sumer that's put in the books is not of Sumerians, but of a people who lived in the hills called the Gudians. The Sumerians were Cushites. The Cushites ruled the world for over several thousand years. The Cushites ruled an area stretching from Nubia, below Egypt, all the way to Mesopotamia. The Sumerians lived in city-states. They were organized into a confederation. They built great monuments and wrote first in the Proto-Sumerian writing and later the cuneiform script. Kushite colonies in Iran was ancient Elam. The Elamites called their country CaGkam, or Kalotam. The capital of Kalotam was called Susa, and the Elamites called it Kaus by the Assyrians, and it was also called Neme by the people of Sumer, and Kushi by the Elamites in the Akkadian inscriptions of the Elamites. It was also called Gizban. What we find is that basically Elam and Samaria were Kushite colonies. The Sumerian god Dumuzi may be a great ancestor of the Tamil. Loga has suggested that the word Tamil may be an evolute of Dumuzi, the name for the Sumerian moon god. Originally, Tammuz, or Dumuzi, was supposedly a king of Uruk. According to Sumerian tradition, Dumuzi lived in the netherworld. When we look at a map, we often look at a map from a European perspective. But when we look at this map from a more ancient Dravidian or ancient Kushite perspective, we see that people were moving from the south into the north. We see that the Proto-Dravidian migration began in Africa and it moved on up through Arabia, across into Iran, and then finally reaching what we would call Sumer today. Sumer is a very interesting place because it's in Mesopotamia. And Mesopotamia, as we all know, was a place where there were many civilizations. There was the Babylonians, the Akkadians, the Elamites, and etc. So we know this area was quite striking in terms of history. But what many people don't know is that the original homeland of the Dravidian-speaking people was the Saharan zone of Middle Africa. We call the ancestors of the Dravidians the Proto-Saharans. The homeland of the Proto-Saharans was the Libyan and Sudanese deserts. It was in this region between 9,000 and 6,000 BC that the elements of Proto-Dravidian culture were created. B.V. Lau proved conclusively that the Dravidians were genetically related to the C group people of Nubia, using archaeology. Given the fact that both groups, those people in Nubia and the Dravidians in South India, they used a common black and red ware. They had a common burial complex incorporating megaliths and circular ground enclosures, and a common type of rock-cut sepulture. The black and red ware industry diffused from Nubia across West Asia into Rajasthan, and thence to East, Central, and South India. This red and black ware is very interesting. It's very interesting because we know in a sense that this red and black ware that was used in Nubia, China, and other places was also used in South India. We, in archaeology and history, we call these ancient people who made this writing, who created this pottery, the C group people. The C group people appear to have spoken Dravidian and Niger-Congo languages. They trace themselves back to a group that the Egyptians called the Tehenu. And the Tehenu were probably the creators of this pottery. The ancestors of Dravidians and Manding and Sumerians organized into a federal system during the Neolithic subpluvial. These early Proto-Saharans made adequate uses of local game and plant life, and they established permanent and seasonal settlements around well-stocked fishing holes. They lived on plains punctuated by mountains and numerous points of inundation due to the frequency of rain in the ancient Sahara. The Proto-Saharans claim descent from the Ma, or Fish Confederation. The Ma Confederation includes the Egyptian, Elamite, Dravidian, Manding, and Sumerian people. In honor of the great ancestor of the Ma Confederation, many of the descendants of this great confederation have Ma in their names. For example, we have the Mandi. We also, in a sense, have, the Makra. But also, in a sense, the major leader of, or god worshipped by these people was Amun, Ammon, or Ammon. The Dravidians originated in Africa. They use the same red and black ceramics as other Africans. Red and black pottery dates back to 4000 BC in Africa. It was used by many Kushite nations, especially the C group people who, as I said, founded the Dravidian nation. When we look at this map of Africa, we can see all of these various groups that lived in Africa. We see that around 3000 BC, or thereabouts, many of these populations began to expand out of Africa into Asia. One of the reasons for these these Dravidian migrations was the fact, in a sense, that there had been a great flood. As a result of the Great Flood, many Ainu civilizations that had formerly dominated Egypt and Mesopotamia, they were in decline, and so the Dravidians, like other people in Middle Africa, began to expand to take over their trade. In addition to the Proto-Saharians paying homage to Ma, they also tried to make sure, in a sense, that they worshiped other gods. The use of black and red ware were usually called Kushites. The Proto-Dravidian migrations were not spontaneous in nature. Their colonization of Central Asia, West Asia, and Mesopotamia was in a sense to a process of gradual migration and settlement, and then moving further. The first Dravidians would have entered the area by boat. Once they had established settlements near the sea, other people migrated overland, bringing the cattle and other goods. The Proto-Dravidian colonists of Inner Asia were motivated by both curiosity and the need for metals. Metallurgy was important to man in the 3rd millennium BC. This was a time when many people had become very productive. Because of their productivity, they needed metals in a sense to keep their industries and keep the people supplied with an abundant source of goods. The Dravidians settled in Asia between 3000 and 2800 BC. From here, the Dravidians spread into Central Asia, China, South and Southwest Asia. It was probably from Iran that Bronze Age Dravidians radiated into Central Asia and thence into Southeast Asia. Menges, a historian and linguist, using linguistic data, assumed an earlier habitat of the Dravidians far to the northwest on the plateau of Iran, an area extending still a little bit more to the north into what has become Turkestan. This view is now confirmed by archaeological evidence of an Indus culture in Inner Asia. We have to remember, in a sense, that when these Dravidians began to migrate, they left ancient Egypt, the area around ancient Egypt, Kush. It's very important to understand that in the Sumerian records, ancient Egypt was not called Egypt, it was called Magan. Ancient Kush, just below Egypt, was called Maluha, and the Indus Valley in the Sumerian text was called Delmun. Many people have assumed that in ancient times the Indus Valley civilization was called Maluha, but this is false. The Sumerians called the area Tamun. These Sumerians and other people, when they left Africa, in a sense, the world was wide open. They knew that the world was round and they wanted to see what was in it. As they began to migrate into these various different parts of the world, they were able to spread their culture and provide the rest of the world with civilization. The epicenter of the Dravidian dispersals in Asia was Iran. The motivation behind Dravidian dispersals was agro-pastoralism in the region and the search for new sources of metal for trade with Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and beyond. This will explain the close relationship between Dravidian, Sumerian, Mandi, and Elamite people on the one hand, and Dravidian, Mandi, and Elamite on the other. A very important civilization for the early Dravidians was Delmun, or the place in India that we call the Indus Valley. From Iran, the Dravidian speakers made their way to the Indus Valley. Here they established cities and states. They made these beautiful seals, and these seals carry the language of Tamil, and they tell us much about the ancient history of the Dravidian people who lived in the Indus Valley. In addition to black and red ware on Proto-Dravidian sites in Asia, there's a clear association of irrigation agriculture and mining operations on the Shortugai plains settled by the Arappans in Central Asia. At Shortugai, archaeologists have found industrial sites where lapis lazuli was worked. In other areas along the steppes, the Dravidians practiced a sedentary pastoral economy centered on irrigation agriculture. The Dravidians were making sure, in a sense, that they spread throughout Asia and the rest of the world to provide these areas with the civilization they needed to become the productive areas they are today. Other Proto-Dravidians entered Turkmenia. As in the rest of Asia, the Dravidians spread over the region by watercraft. This is one of the reasons why the Indus Valley civilization, as well as Sumerian civilizations, were established along rivers. They were established along rivers because most of the Tamil and other Kushite people communicated via the sea. They knew, in a sense, by the fact that in ancient times it was a very much wetter place. Because Africa was a very much wetter place, most of the people communicated by using astronomical navigation. They used this astronomical navigation ability to be able to expand into other parts of the world. An interesting result of the Dravidian existence in Africa was the fact that the Dravidians and the Elamites and the Sumerians, they had a common script. This common script that these people used was, in a sense, found on much of the ancient pottery that's been recovered from these ancient sites. Many archaeologists who've done research in Africa have discovered these pottery marks that they call thinite. It's very interesting that many of these pottery marks that are called thinite later became the writing or syllabic writing systems for the various Kushite people, like the Sumerians, the Elamites, and the Proto-Dravidians. These pottery marks, in a sense, show complete analogy. You find, in a sense, that these pottery marks appear on some of the earliest pottery from ancient India and Indus Valley. You also see these pottery marks even in the Indus Valley seals, and that many of these signs that are on the seal come from the thinite writing. So what we have, in a sense, is that we have the beginnings of writing here. So we know that when the Dravidians came to India, the Indus Valley, Mesopotamia, the Dravidians already had writing. They were not an illiterate people. They had writing, they had culture, and they had architecture. The Sumerian story about Dumuzi probably records the expansion of the Proto-Saharan tribes from Mesopotamia into Central Asia that later became the Tamil. Dumuzi was supposed to have been exiled from the Sumerian city of Uruk by the demons of either of these cities. The phonetic laws operating in Dravidian offer no problem in deriving Tamil from Dumuzi. These people may have been called demons because of the fact that they would not allow the early Tamil people to remain in Sumer, so they had to migrate to other areas of Asia. The Sumerians called themselves CaGkam, meaning the black people. Now, however, complicated the migration patterns. It is very clear, according to Dr. Loga, that the Indian languages are basically Dravidian. Dr. Loga teaches that the distinction between Dravidian and Indo-Aryan may not hold. He's made clear. He has shown that Sanskrit and Pali are derivatives of Sumero-Tamil. It also suggests that the language of the Indus Valley was probably a variant of Sumero-Tamil, a Dravidian language, which Dr. Loga suggested in many places. What I found, in a sense, through my decipherment of the Indus Valley writing is that, in a way, Dr. Loga is correct. These early inscriptions from the Indus Valley are written in Tamil. Dr. Loga does not believe in any Aryan invasion into India prior to Alexander's invasion. Also, Dr. Loga has pointed out many times the word Aryan is Sumero-Tamil, and it simply means great or noble, radiant, and so forth. Using this information, Sumerian king Sugi calls himself Lugal-Ariya, the Aryan king, and he is Sumero-Tamil, a black one at that. The Aryan myth can be dispelled by bringing in Sumero-Tamil studies into the studies of ancient Indian languages and culture. Dr. Loga finds that in the deepest layers of the CaGkam literature, mention of the Vedas with great respect. In fact, Dr. Loga has found that the Palyaka, the Sale, the Muta Kudumi, the Peru Vazuti, a Pandyan king who seems to have favored Vedic culture of the Yajnas. The Yaka Sale. There is a similar description in the Upanishads, Yajnavalkya, which is certainly Sumero-Tamil, Ijempalkya, a place, key of many Pao Yajnas, or fire worship. So again, Dr. Loga is able to go into depth, go into detail, and he's able to show, in a sense, that the Cangkam literature is really literature that is based upon ancient Tamil, the ancient civilization. the ancient language. Dr. Loganatha noticed that Sumero-Tamil serves as a basis for Sanskrit and also Pali, and which in fact he has shown that Sanskrit is just as Dravidian as Telugu is. Amazing, isn't it? Amazing, but this is what Dr. Loga has been able to do. It is not a matter of lexicon, but also a matter of grammatical features. Just to cite one example, Dr. Loga likes to discuss the plural marker in the Archaic literature, like Rishi beer. Whereas beer is a plural person marker, it is derived from Sumerian baer, where air is derived from Sumerian ine, Tamil ina. This baer exists in Tamil as pier. Also, in traditional linguists in India, specifically in Tamil Nadu, they don't affirm, in a sense, the similarity between Sumerian and Tamil. A good example is that Subramana Dishkitar, who wrote the CaGkam in the 17th century AD, he affirmed that Sanskrit is case grammatical just as Tamil is. It is only after the arrival of European linguists that Sanskrit was torn away from belonging to the Tamilian tradition, the Indian tradition, and placed in the European family of languages, and not something similar to the Dravidian and so forth. It is with this that we have the birth of Aryan-Dravidian dichotomy, with Aryan linked racially with the European tribes. It's very important to remember that when we talk about Sanskritic literature, we have to remember that Sanskrit as a grammar was put into its present state by Panini. And Panini lived in an area where there were already Greeks living. To me, Sanskrit is nothing but a lingua franca. And because Sanskrit is a lingua franca, it includes many elements from the languages that were spoken during the day of Panini. And this is why we find a similarity between Sanskrit and Greek, is because many Greeks lived in the area when Sanskrit was created. Langdon, a very noted student of Sumerian, he has noted that the cuneiform script evolved by Sumerians and had the capacity only for writing the 4 basic vowels, A, U, I, and E. The strategy for writing down more complex vowels was evolved only during the Ur dynasty, where the scribes combined the signs for a single vowel to write down other vowels, including diphthongs, which Dr. Loga has shown are really related to Sumerian and Tamil. Dr. Loga has been able to show that many Sumerian vowels correspond exactly to vowels in Tamil. Because some of the Tamil are descendants of Sumerians, we find many Tamil, Sumerian, and Akkadian cognate terms. Dr. Loga's Sumero-Tamil hypothesis for the origin of Sanskrit is very evident when he does a comparison of the Vedic V and the Sumerian K. What he found is that when you look at these Sanskrit and Sumerian words, you see that there's a clear alternation between V in Vedic and K in Sumerian. This hypothesis is testable using comparative linguistics. In discussing the relatedness of 2 or more languages, we imagine 3 possible origins for this phenomenon. 1, chance. 2, borrowing items from one language into another. And 3, common origin. The comparative linguistic method consists of comparing terms from diverse languages suspected of possessing similar meanings and phonetic shape. to determine if the lexical items are descended from a common source. To establish if the terms are cognate, researchers study the words and determine if the words are systematically resemble each other. Let's look at our Sumerian cast versus Vedic vas. The study of language sound change among and between the phonetic shape of the words within a language in a regular manner. Stated simply, the regularity hypothesis assumes that sound changes are regular with cognate terms. Dr. Loga has made it clear that Sumerian cast corresponds to Vedic vas. The regularity principle predicts that if Vedic V corresponds to Sumerian K, it will appear in other lexical items in these languages. It shows in a sense that if you can find a Vedic V and a Sumerian K, words that have similar meaning, words in a sense that are written similarly, then that shows a relationship. This is exactly what we find when we compare Vedic and Sumerian words. The ability of Dr. Loga to predict that the Vedic V and Sumerian K alternation pattern occurs regularly among Sumerian Vedic Tamil cognate terms confirms Dr. Loga's hypothesis that Tamil terms are earlier than the cognate Vedic terms. We must conclude that the pronunciation of Tamil lexical items was Sanskritized when Sanskrit was invented as a lingua franca to unite the diverse people of India into a common written language. The history of Sumerian makes it clear that this language is much older than Sanskrit or any other documented Indo-European language. In conclusion, the Dravidian people originated in Middle Africa. After 3000 BC, they began to expand throughout the world. Some went to Mesopotamia, some went to Europe. Some also crossed the land bridge which formerly connected India and East Africa. These Dravidians came from different places, but they all came to India and made it a center of Dravidian civilization. These people, in a sense, also had a close relationship to the Sumerians. Dr. Loga begs the question, if Sanskrit and Pali are also variants of Sumero-Tamil, what will be the fate of the notion of the Indo-Aryan family of languages? Dr. Loga wrote, while there may be some influences of Hittites, Mitanni, and so forth, it appears to me that the Sanskrit remains essentially Sumero-Tamil, where even there is memory of Surukpak, the great sage of the Sumerians. I believe, he continued, that in the migration of Sumerians to the land of India, after about 2000 BC or so, these Dravidians suffered many changes in language and culture, but somehow retained their overall identity and later merged quite well for the Dravidian folks in the South. Dr. Loga has proven that Sumeru was once a home of many Tamil speakers. He's also been able to show that the Sumerian language is related to Tamil. This is great news for all of us, and it shows us what a great leader, a great linguist, a great psychologist, a great philosopher, Dr. K.Loganatha Muttarayan is. And we thank God for giving us this great man to help us to understand the connection between Sumerian and Tamil.